Trump's second-term economic policies, long-term structural change, historical recurrence, and policy paradigm shift. Introduction. The potential return of Donald Trump to the U.S. presidency in 2025 marks a pivotal moment. In the trajectory of global economic history, Trump's first term 2017-2021 was characterized by assertive trade policies, skepticism toward multilateral institutions, and a preference for bilateralism and nationalism over globalism. If Trump reclaims the White House, his second term is expected to further intensify and institutionalize these trends. This paper explores three major themes of Trump's second term. Economic vision, framed within the broader patterns of long-term structural change, historical recurrence, and policy paradigm shifts. 1. The revival of 21st century U.S. protectionism and economic bloc formation. 2. The destabilization of dollar hegemony and a new currency war. And 3. The resurgence of state-led industrial policy and the possible end of neoliberalism. 1. The revival of 21st century U.S. protectionism and economic blocs. A second tariff war. Trump's economic philosophy centers on America First, a doctrine rooted in economic nationalism and strategic protectionism. In a second term, it is highly probable that Trump would intensify tariffs, not only against geopolitical rivals like China, but also against allies such as the European Union, South Korea, and Mexican nations previously granted exemptions or negotiated settlements. Historical parallel: the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act and the 1930s. The historical analogy often cited in this context is the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which sharply raised U.S. import duties and triggered a cascade of retaliatory tariffs worldwide. This protectionist spiral significantly worsened the Great Depression. By contracting global trade and deepening economic nationalism, a new Trump-led tariff war could similarly unravel global trade norms, accelerate deglobalization, and lead to the rise of economic blocs, where trade is managed within strategic alliances rather than through multilateral frameworks. From globalization to deglobalization, the Trumpian trade doctrine marks a shift from the post-Cold War liberal economic order, where global supply chains and free trade were assumed to benefit all. Instead, Trump's policies seek to reconfigure global supply chains in ways that prioritize national security over economic efficiency. For instance, proposals to impose a universal baseline tariff on all imports could effectively dismantle the WTO system and push countries toward preferential trade zones and regionalism, reminiscent of empire trade during the interwar period. Implications: such moves could have wide-reaching implications. They might force multinational corporations to restructure production away from low-cost regions. Emerging economies reliant on U.S. markets could face destabilizing shocks. The rules-based global order that evolved post-1945 may erode further, replaced by a more fragmented and contested system. 2. Dollar hegemony and the fracturing of the global monetary order. A new currency war in Trump's second term. The second major theme is the potential weakening of dollar hegemony in the global financial system under Trump's renewed leadership. Trump has long criticized the Federal Reserve for raising interest rates and has openly favored a weaker dollar to boost exports and reduce trade deficits. His disdain for international financial institutions like the IMF and WTO and his transactional approach to diplomacy could contribute to a realignment of the global monetary architecture. Historical parallel: Nixon shock and the collapse of Bretton Woods. In 1971, President Nixon unilaterally suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold, ending the Bretton Woods system. This decision marked a dramatic pivot in international monetary history and ushered in the era of floating exchange rates. A Trump 2.0 administration could trigger a similarly disruptive shift, not through gold convertibility, but via policy unpredictability, withdrawal from global coordination mechanisms, and geopolitical fragmentation. Rise of alternatives, BRICS, digital currencies, and financial nationalism. The geopolitical context of 2025 differs significantly from that of the early 1970s. China's yuan, BRICS nations' discussions of a common currency, and central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, offer alternatives to the dollar-centric system. If Trump weaponizes the dollar e.g., sanctions, swift exclusion, other nations may accelerate efforts to de-dollarize their trade and reserves. Financial nationalism, once marginal, is now central. Countries may impose capital controls, restrict foreign ownership, and erect barriers to financial flows in ways that reflect a broader decoupling from U.S.-led financial institutions. Implications: the dollar's share of global reserves could decline. Geopolitical alliances might increasingly determine currency arrangements. Currency volatility and interest rate divergence could intensify. Global economic instability. 3. State-led industrial policy and decoupling strategy. The end of neoliberalism in the 21st century, perhaps the most profound shift under Trump 2.0, would be the mainstreaming of state-led industrial policy in the United States. The Trump administration already laid the groundwork for this in his first term by promoting tariffs, investing in U.S. manufacturing, and restricting foreign technology investments. In a second term, Trump is expected to double down on reshoring critical industries, restricting Chinese access to U.S. technologies, and pushing a full-fledged tech decoupling. Historical parallel from TVA to 21st century economic security. This trajectory recalls the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, and New Deal programs that directly invested in regional industrial development during the 1930s. It also mirrors the East Asian developmental state model of the 1960s-70s, in which governments strategically directed capital and technology to priority sectors, in contrast to the neoliberal orthodoxy dominant since the Reagan era, emphasizing deregulation, privatization, and free markets. Trumpism embraces a muscular mercantilism that fuses economic nationalism with strategic planning, supply chain security, and strategic autonomy. Trump's industrial policy is anchored in the notion of supply chain sovereignty. Whether in semiconductors, renewable energy, or pharmaceuticals, the objective is to reduce dependence on foreign inputs, especially from China. This approach is not unique to Trump. It echoes broader global trends in economic securitization. However, Trump is likely to apply it more aggressively with executive orders, national security justifications, and expanded investment screening mechanisms. Implications: a shift toward fortress economies with rigid capital and trade controls, a redefinition of strategic industries as core to national security, the erosion of the neoliberal consensus, replaced by a new bipartisan acceptance of economic nationalism. Conclusion: a historical turning point. Trump's second term could mark a decisive inflection point in 21st century economic history. Rather than being an anomaly, Trumpism may reflect deeper structural shifts: the exhaustion of globalization's momentum, the return of great power rivalry, and the transformation of capitalism into a more state-centric, security-driven form. These dynamics echo major historical transformations, from the interwar protectionism of the 1930s to the monetary realignments of the 1970s and the developmentalist models of the post-war era. Yet they are also shaped by unprecedented challenges: digital technology, climate change, and multipolar power dynamics. In this sense, the second Trump presidency, should it materialize, would not merely reprise past policies, but potentially herald a paradigm shift in the global economic order, with implications that extend far beyond the United States. Let me know if you'd like a citation list, or this version formatted into an academic paper or slide presentation.